Hey folks, I wanted to apologize for something, and that is that I did not record today's meeting. So I'll get up some notes for today's meeting. They will be pretty short since it will basically boil down to websites are lying if they tell you that it's easy to set up they tell you it's easy to set up an email server from scratch. So we want to find easier ways to do that for the competition. And for homework, please continue what you were working on at the end of class, trying to set up an email server that will work both with normal email clients and which will have a webmail component as well. So what I wanted to do was to go ahead and do some of the demos I wanted to do last week that I tried to do that didn't work so well. And what I've got is a screen with two different Ubuntu's on it. This one on the right that is still open and didn't lock on me is a local one that's pretty brand new. It's been around for a while. I just don't use it very much. Let me see if it has it does have an SSH folder in it. And this is the one I was using with little Bobby tables on my, I think, Palo or Detroit instance last week. But we won't use these certificates. We'll create some new ones. But basically, this will be the client today. And then this other one is the Vinton instance that I had up earlier. Let me connect back to this. And this will be the server. And right now, if we look, we can see that, for example, SSHD is not installed. And I don't think the SSH client, even the SSH client is not installed. So the first thing we need to do is get those guys installed. So that'd be apt install open SSHD client and open SSHD, open SSH client and open SSH server. And I'm Vinton, so I need to use sudo to do that. If you remember this morning, Vinton was not in the sudoers file. I added that user since then because I just thought if I don't do that, I'll probably try to use sudo over and over. And that might be a little frustrating. Oh, up here on the right, I forgot to get this going. I've got a stopwatch. Just wanted to show that it does not actually take this long to do this. So although I'm running without a net again, so if it takes forever, it takes forever. But now I should have the SSH client installed over here. And if I look at system cuddle, you can see that I've got SSH and SSHD installed. The uptime should show here, right? There we go, since 14.12, and you can see over in the lower right, it is 14.12 right now. So this thing just started running a moment ago. So if I come over to the client side, this does have SSH installed. And so I'm going to connect over to the machine called Vinton. Let me make sure I can ping it. I was having a little trouble with that earlier because Vinton was using a NATed address and I needed to make sure I got it onto the reachable addresses by bridging that adapter. That looks like it's right now. So I'm going to go ahead and SSH over as Vinton. And I apologize that the host is also called Vinton, but it is. And we'll go ahead and let that prompt me for a password. First, of course, it'll say, hey, this fingerprint for the server, I don't have this in known hosts. Do you want me to add it there? And I'll say yes. And it warns me that it's added it just like I asked it to. Seems like a weird thing to warn me about. But I'll go ahead and type in that password. And I go ahead and get connected, right? That's a good thing. So now we've got basic SSH working, default configurations, everything's working as it should be. I'll go ahead and exit this SSH session and clear that screen. just to get us back to sort of a known good state on the right side. And we'll leave Vinton alone there on the left. So now what we were trying to do last week was to get certificates working. Oh, by the way, notice that took about 2.5 minutes to get going there. What we wanted to do as a next step was to get SSH certificates working. And that doesn't take too long to do either. I'm going to say I want to run, not open, just SSH keygen. And today I'm going to give it a passphrase like Axel did for his homework that he did before last Saturday. So I'm going to say SSH keygen. It's asking me where I want to save this. Let me move my stopwatch just for a little bit. And it's going to default to my .ssh directory, and that's cool. But I would like this to be a special certificate name for Vinton. So I'm going to say /home/chris/.ssh/Vinton. And you can see that if you forget or are not sure rather whether to put the .pub on the end of this, look at your prompt, look at the default. The default says ID underscore RSA. It doesn't say .pub at the end of the prompt. So don't use .pub in the answer that you're giving here. So I'll say I want a certificate. I'm sorry, not a certificate. I want a key pair named Vinton, and it'll go ahead and do that. It asks me for a passphrase. I'm just going to use the word password, but I want this to make something clear in the demo later. Now it creates that key pair for me, gives me a little bit of fun random art, some ASCII art there, which I don't use. I'm not actually sure what that's used for. And if I look in my SSH directory, .ssh, put my stopwatch back at the top where it belongs. And you can see that I've got Vinton and Vinton.pub, right? Now, let me come over here. Now clear this. If I look, let me just do this. If I look at the Vinton directory, I have to squint because of the coloring, but you can see that there is no .ssh folder here, right? Nothing going on there. So I'm going to go ahead and make one. And hopefully you'll recall from last week that these .ssh folders have to be locked down or the SSH processes will not use them, right? At the very least, you have to have your public keys locked down. And you can see that SSH keygen was aware of that. It made the private key over here on Cardiff. It made the private key read-write so that only my user has access to this. So the user Vinton has read-write access, but the group, I'm sorry, wrong server. The user Chris has read-write access to this file, but even the associated group Chris and the public has no access at all, right? Now they gave the whole world, the group and the whole world public read access to my public file, but that's okay. Anybody can read your public file, right? So you have to have that directory locked down. And the way I've done that on Cardiff for the Chris account is to make this directory over here. I don't know if you can see, but that's a single dot, which means this directory. It's set to read, write, and execute just for the user Chris. And that's what I'm going to do over here. I'm going to make this new SSH folder. I'm going to make it read, write, execute, which is 4 + 3 + or 4 + 2 + 1. Read is 4, write is 2, execute is 1. And that's what I'm going to do for .ssh. Execute, by the way, for a directory has a different meaning than it does for a file. Execute for a file means you can run it. Execute for a directory means you can go into it. So if I don't have execute permissions on this file, I can't do that, or I can't open it up in a file explorer, just FYI. So now I've got an appropriate folder .ssh. And one thing I didn't tell you last week, we were talking about, well, how do I get my, I'm going to back up a little, sorry about this. The next step is to get my public key from Chris Chris's account on Cardiff. I need to get that over into this account Vinton on the other machine, right? And that's what I will use instead of supplying Vinton's password. I will just say, hey, I've got the private key that corresponds to this public key. So my private key, Vinton, is not going to go anywhere. We never give that private key to anyone. We just kind of guard it with our lives. But this public key we can give to anybody at all, and it won't be a problem, okay? So the question is, well, how do I get that public key over to this other server? And we went through several ways you can do this. One that's really handy, and let me just show this to you. This is how you know it's a public key, is that you know, it's a public key. It starts with a public RSA key. Will look like this. Starts with SSH RSA. This is a public RSA key of this type. We'll start with SSH RSA. And it's got a big blob of base 64 stuff, ends with an equal sign, and then it has the username at computer name of the person who invoked it. This part isn't actually used as verification, it's just info. If you're looking at the public key, and I'm only going to show you this because I don't care about this public key, right? It's on a VM. Sorry, SSH. Oh, I see what I did. .SSH Vinton. Oh, this is word wrapped really bad. So these are actually, let me make this really small. Oh, I can't. Why not? Don't know. I'm doing something wrong with my my Zoom, or I'll do that with my mouse. You can see it says right at the top, begin open SSH private key. If your file says that at the top, and if it sends end open SSH private key at the bottom, you never want that file to go anywhere. You don't send that one anyplace. So if you're on, in my case, I'm using WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux, as my client. And this one has a sneaky, awesome way to get that public key copied someplace else. It won't work on vSphere. We've been talking about that. We're having trouble pasting into that. But since I can display this public key, right, like that, and since WSL and Windows work pretty nicely with each other, I can actually do that and then copy it over to clip.exe, which is a Windows program. And now it's in my copy paste buffer. So now I can do things like, let me just open up Vim here just as a demo. So if I'm in Vim and I set this paste mode so that it will paste nicely, I can actually come over here and say, I would like this pasted. Oh, it'll paste, shoot. My bad, I don't have the clipboard on, do I? Something is wrong, clipboard's disabled. I think I'll have to do more than just enable it, but let's see. Yeah, that's okay. Let me go out to a Windows program and just show you. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I just launched a program. Where is it? Okay, let me go fetch this. Okay, this is my go-to editor for things that involve regex, but you can see that the Windows copy buffer has this thing. So if you're in a hurry and you are in WSL, and that's your client, and you have a target that will accept copy and paste, which VirtualBox would if I had it set up correctly. My apologies there. Then you can just use clip to get the thing over there, and you can paste it into the correct file. You have to remember that the correct file is called authorized keys, which matters here because we just created this folder for Vinton and Vinton doesn't have it. But one thing I didn't tell you last week, because I like to make things hard, is that there's this program called SSH Copy ID. And if you look at the man page for it, you'll see that you can tell it an identity file, so I can pick which key I want to send over, right? And then I can do user at hostname just like I would for SSH, and it will prompt me for a password. So instead of remembering all of that we talked about last week, I can say SSH copy ID. I can give an identity file. So I can say I want SSH Vinton.pub. Oh, and that was interesting. I didn't expect that, but this thing knows that I'm not going to send, it doesn't want me to send a private key. So when I typed VIN and hit tab, it said it completed Vinton.pub. It's like, I'm not going to let you send something that doesn't say .pub at the end. So the autocomplete understood this. And now I'm going to say, I want to send this to Vinton at Vinton. That's the user at hostname. Uh-oh. SSH could not resolve hostname Vinton. Why not? We can. Vinton at Vinton.local. Okay. For some reason, it needed the domain name, which has been given to us as local. Oh, man. I'm looking. Hang on. Is known by other names. I've never used this utility before. I just saw it today and I thought, well, that would be really nice for everybody. Did I get I'm just going to recheck the man page, make sure -I was the right argument, -I for identity file, and user at hostname goes last. Forced mode doesn't check if keys are present on the remote server. This means that it does not need the private key. Do a dry run. Okay. I don't think it worked, but I guess we should check, right? No, it didn't work. I'm going to try that force parameter. I didn't understand it fully, but let's see what it says. Okay, so now for some reason, that time it said it worked. We'll figure out later what the ins and outs of that are. But I'll go over here on Vinton and look, and now there's a file called authorized keys. I didn't have to remember the name authorized keys. And if I look at that file, you can see it has a key that's all on one line, right? It's got a public key there that should look an awful lot like this one. Okay. Font sizes are different and everything, but that should be exactly the same key. Oh, I didn't notice. At first it asked me for, see how you have to read the screen. Doesn't that stink? This first time it asked me for Vinton's password, and then I went over and I enabled certificates. And then I came back and I saw it asking me for a password. And you all saw this and you're screaming at the video. By the way, I can't hear you, all right? Because it was asking me for my certificate password, my passphrase. So, and either of those last two times would have worked. I apologize. So it didn't take 20 minutes. It took 15 or something minutes plus the speed of senility. So that's working. So the password piece is working just fine. So now we'd like to get the Google Authenticator piece to work on top of that, right? And so now all I'm having to do to log in is to supply the password for my certificate, and that's all. So that's one password. And the cool thing about that is that I could take that certificate and go to any server in any user account and just plop that key pair, put those keys into my .ssh folder, and I can log in to this account Vinton on this machine called Vinton. Now, what I'm going to do over here on the Vinton servers, I'm going to install the Google Authenticator software. So that's, I think it's just called Google Authenticator, but I'm going to sniff it out here. Yeah, I'll use app search. I think it's libpam Google Authenticator, but I can't remember. Yeah, okay, so we'll install that. App install libpam Google Authenticator. Big 205 kilobytes of additional disk space will be used. Let's make sure you've budgeted disk space for that. It's that. So now I'm going to go back to the user account to Vinton. And Vinton now needs to run, right, the Google Authenticator app. We went through this last week. And we have a few questions to answer. We do want these to be time-based. Time-based means they expire every so many seconds, so we'll say yes to that. And we get this huge QR code. It just makes you laugh every time you see it, right? And yeah, so I'm going to copy that. The way I do this, I told you last week, I don't read the QR because I want to keep this code. I'll pop up my authenticator. I keep my passwords in 1Password, and I keep all of my, these are TOTPs, TOTP secrets, or OTP secrets, that secret key. I keep them in another vault, which for me is in Bitwarden. Probably shouldn't even tell you that. But the idea is that you don't want to keep your OTP secrets, your one-time password secrets, in the same password vault that you use for your passwords, because then if somebody compromises your password vault, then they have your one-time password secrets too, and your two-factor auth is broken all at once. So you want to store these someplace else, but you do want to save them. And the reason you want to save them, let me pop open my YubiKey authenticator here. One moment. There it is. And the reason you want to save them is because, if you lose a YubiKey, or I was going to say if you damage a YubiKey, but I talked to a guy who worked at Yubico and was good friends with the person who designed some of these. And they basically said, they try to make them indestructible. I lost one. It was outside a good part of the winter. Was in the parking lot, it had been salted and sanded, and of course cars drove over it all winter long, and we finally found it in later in the year, and I'm still using it. It's in my USB hub right now. This might be it, don't know. But the reason you want it is so that if you get a new YubiKey, right, and you want to have this thing on both YubiKeys, as a backup, you have to have this code, or else you have to come back and reset your authentication, which is a lot less fun. So I'm going to take that code, and all of your password managers, have a way to add an account manually. And to me, that's just a lot better than having the QR code. You could take a screenshot of the QR code, but think about it. I'm on my laptop right now, and if my password vault has a picture of this QR code, now I need utilities to fake the QR scan and all that. It's just a lot easier to just add this thing. So you pop the secret key in there. You say the account name is Vinton at Vinton, or whatever it is. I'm going to require touch. All these others are fine. 6 digits. In fact, those are the defaults. And if you change those, most providers will not work without fiddling with them. So now you'll notice over here on Vinton, they're waiting for me to verify this. I can put in a -1 to skip the verification, but I do want to know that I've got this right. So I'm going to come over here and double click on Vinton. And now my YubiKey is waiting for me to touch it. And it copied this code to the keyboard. I'm going to come over here and paste that in and hit enter. Oh, says I blew it. I'm going to try it one more time. I'm going to touch it again. I noticed that one was just about expired. It says I got it right that time. Nice that they told me the right answer, but you can see it as the one that was generated by the utility also. It tells me my emergency codes. Those are the ones you can use if you can't get to whatever way you generate your passcodes. So you can keep these on your phone or whatever. And now it says, do you want me to update this file? And the file is actually just where they keep all the config. It's a protected file in your home directory. It asks you a series of questions we talked about last week. Do you want to disallow multiple uses of the same auth token? Yes. I don't want somebody to look over my shoulder, see 007530, see that I used it and it worked, and then go and use it themselves because they know it's good. I want it to work once and only once. This says they generate a token every 30 seconds, but since time drift is a thing between computers, by default, they allow the previous code, the current code, and the next code to work. But they say, well, would you like us to expand that so that we'll accept the previous 8, the next 8, and the current one? That's a 4-minute window. And I'm like, no, I really don't want you to do that. If our clocks are that far out of sync, I've got other problems, and I'm just not comfortable with that. So I say no to this. And then this, I think it's the last question, says that, if your computer is not adequately hardened, we can rate limit so that somebody can only do 3 attempts every 30 seconds. And I always think, well, even if I'm nicely hardened, I still want you to rate limit this because I believe in security and depth. Harden every layer I can harden. So we've got that. And now that's installed. You can see that you have this Google Authenticator file, which includes some information. You say, well, can't anybody just get at that and walk off with it? And the answer is no, because it's protected. Only you can read it. Nobody can write it. Of course, you could force yourself to write to it. These are in plain text, your emergency codes. So you want to keep this file protected, right? But that's not all you have to do, excuse me, to get Google Authenticator to work. There are a few other things that are necessary. So we're going to look at those just for a second. Excuse me. I'm going to need to get a drink here. Okay. So the first other change we have to do, we're at 31 minutes, and that includes a little bit of me goofing up, but not too much. So half an hour so far. One thing we have to do on the server, and everything we have to do now is on the server, because on the client, all we're going to do is run YubiKey or Google Authenticator or something and generate codes using that one-time password secret. So there's a couple other things we need to do on the server. One of them is we have to, we better do them as root because we can't do them otherwise. So I'm going to turn myself into root. Not sure why that didn't ask me for a password, but I'll look at that later. And we need to edit a file called etc pamd sshd. So PAM is the pluggable authentication module manager for Linux, and it can plug in different modules into authentication processes. We'll have to go back into SSHD config to turn PAM back on, I believe. But SSHD has can plug into PAM or let PAM plug into it. I'm not sure which way that works. But we have to edit this file to tell SSHD that this Google Authenticator object or system is able to plug into this whole login process for SSH. So what we have to do is go to the end of this file. Whoops, I don't think I'm typing correctly there. What we have to do is go to the end of this file, typing vim commands correctly. And I'll go ahead. I should have been doing this before, putting comments where I make changes. And there's a config line you have to type. And I'm just pulling this from the same document I'd given you guys about how to SSH properly. It's already in our meeting notes someplace, and it's in Zulip as well. And the line says auth. So this is an authentication mechanism, and it says it's required, and it's called PAM Google Authenticator. Authenticator.so. And then it's null okay. So PAM Google Authenticator.so is a shared object, which is similar to DLL in Windows. I mentioned that last week. A lot of this I mentioned last week. It just didn't work. Null okay means that if you don't have this configured yet, you can still log in. So it's going to try to use Google Authenticator, but it's some kind of hybrid behavior that I haven't figured out yet. But for the competition, if we use this, we could go ahead and get rid of that null okay once we had this set up. Or if you're doing this, for your own business, you could get rid of this. And what you do as an administrator is run the Google Authenticator setup, and then just give the user their QR code. And if they asked for their manual setup code, you could just give that to them. They don't have to get on the server first, right? The administrator can give them what they need to get set up. So we have to do that. On Ubuntu, we also have to comment out something, and that is, whoops, oh, I just jammed my finger on my screen, so I lost focus there. So we have to go to the top, I think, and there's something, is it this one? We have to comment out on Ubuntu, comment out, include comment off. That's the right one. So we got to comment that out. And I think that's it for pam.d/sshd. I think that's all we have to do there. But we're going to have to also make some changes in sshd config. Okay, I was gone for a while. What I did, and it took me a little while to get there, was found another virtual machine I could use and uninstalled SSH on it and reinstalled SSH on it so I could get a clean copy of an SSHD config, since I had set some things earlier when I was confused about what when I was confused, thinking that gosh, hang on. Let me do this again. Here we go. Okay, so that took me a little bit of time. Mostly it was mechanics. What I did was I went and found another VM that I didn't need that already had SSH installed on it. And I went ahead and uninstalled SSHD and purged it so that the config files weren't there. I reinstalled it so that I could get a clean copy of SSHD config and used that to walk back the changes I had made to SSHD config. You might have remembered me saying that I should have commented where I made changes earlier, and I hadn't done that. If I had done that, I'd be able to just look at the file and undo my changes. And what I did is a perfect example of how not to make those changes. If you'll recall, I had tried to SSH over after I had gotten my key pairs set up. It didn't work. I went over and made a config change to enable key pair authentication. I believe I came back and it was working. It was asking me for the passphrase for my key pair for my private key. But when I saw that, I thought it was asking for the password for the user on the Vinton server. And I didn't notice that. And so I went over and made quite a few changes just to say, okay, what if I like change all the configs related to this, and will it work then? And when I came back and tried it again, I was like, oh, I didn't need to do any of that because it's already asking me for the password for my private key. So with that in mind, I did something that I recommend for us as a team. When we get a server handed to us by the competition and we want to make sure it's okay, one of the things we can do with our with the services they give us is to install a new copy, a fresh copy on a reference box, and to look at the config files that they give us, or that you get from the fresh install, and compare that to the ones that are on the machines that the competition will give us. In this case, happily, I found that I was not trying to launch any malware or anything. I had just screwed up the config. So I backed out all of those changes, and I'm going to reinstall the ones we actually need. My apologies for that. And if I look now a little slower, more methodically, we do need to, if we want to harden this up, I'm going to try this, make sure and see if it works. I'm going to go ahead and go all the way back to the certificate changes. The certificates are still in place, but if we want to shut off password authentication, we want to bring this this setting back into play. I'm going to go ahead and comment this, right? Whoops, that was the wrong. There we go. C. Leonard 2024-02-17. And just looking this over, I think that's the only one they recommend for certificates. And if we do that, we should be able to go ahead and authenticate with certs. Actually, if you can see over here, I'd already gone ahead and done that. I'm still pointing it at my specific cert. If you've named your cert ID _RSA or a number of other defaults, the cert will be discovered automatically. But in this case, I've given it an odd name. So I'm going to just go ahead and do this. I keep saying cert, my apologies. It's a private key, not a certificate. So I'm going to go ahead and give it the password for this private key. And when I do that, it goes ahead and gets me into Vinton without using a password on this without using a password for the user account for Vinton. Okay, so now we've got. I still have the Google Authenticator file over here on Vinton, right there. And so the question was, well, what do we need to do in Pam's SSHD config? We made a couple of changes there for Google Authenticator, and you can look at the transcript and go back and look at those if you want. But we also want to make a few changes to SSHD config. And to do that, looking at the notes here, I don't think there's too much we need to do. Let's check. So is that right? So it says we need to look for a challenge response authentication setting. I think that's the one we looked for before and could not find, but let's give it a go. So I'm going to turn myself into root on the server. And then we'll say we want to edit SSHD config. Whoops. Sorry. There we go. Oh, I know what I was doing. Set case insensitive. So we want to look for authentication methods. I think the only place I've got it is where I added it earlier. This one I did put a, oh, no. Well, that one we do need. So let's go ahead and look at that. This is the second one though. Authentication methods. It says here public key, comma, keyboard dash interactive. So that looks correct. I'm going to uncomment that. But the one I was just talking about was challenge. Little R for response. It doesn't look like that one's here. Now that seems a little weird, but I'm going to go ahead and add it. Challenge response authentication. No. I'll change it to yes. All right. So going to look for it in PAM. It's not in there either. Okay, so we're just going to try it. That's what the doc said. I don't remember this being an issue before. We'll see if SSH will restart with that setting in there or not. So we'll go ahead and run system pedal again. Oh, my bad. Yeah, I bet it's complaining about that unknown. That setting being unknown. Let's see. So we'll look at this. Does this use VI commands? Let's find out. I'll try to go back a screen at a time. It does. Authentication methods cannot be satisfied by enabled authentication or disabled method. I really wish I could read this. What file is this? Doesn't tell me. Okay. I don't know where that file is. Let's see. That up in I'm gonna look that up in a different screen here. Hang on. So what file does journal cuddle read? It's probably in the man page too. Like it might go through all the system logs. So in that case, probably means that if we look in our log, that there's probably, let's see. But it's just in syslog. Let's look there. Don't want to edit syslog. I just want to view it. All right. So we see this authentication methods cannot be satisfied by enable authentication methods. That clause cannot be satisfied by the enable authentication methods compound noun. Disabled method keyboard interactive in authentication. Oh, I think I remember this. This is disabled someplace, but then we've asked for it in this setting. So let's take a look for that. Let's look for it. Keep with, wow, not there. KBD, not keyboard. Change to yes to enable stuff like PAN modules. So let's try that. That looks promising. Yeah. All right, back over here. Oh, I'm already venting. My bad. By the way, before I paused, before I paused the recording, I realized I was trying to log into Vinton from Vinton. So in case you noticed that, yep, whoops, my bad. So let's see what happens this time. I'm going to get asked for that key, and there it is. Finally, after an hour, not quite as simple as I said, but it wants my verification code. This is Google Authenticator. I'm going to pull this over someplace down. Oh, there it is right there. Vinton at Vinton. My YubiKey is flashing now because it wants me to touch it. So I'll touch it. I get a code. Come over here. I think I might have pasted it like 12 times. There we go. Pasted it once, and now I'm in. Now there's something really cool about this. And this is why I made this hour-long video that I hope you can watch. You know, I'm not going to try to shorten it up. My apologies. I do encourage you, and I'll try to remember to put this in the announcement in Zulip, but I think you could probably watch this at like 1.25x. Some of you might be able to do it at 1.5x. You can slow it down when it gets to a part you need to pay attention to. I think that's how we're going to shorten the videos instead of me trying to cut them, because it just takes too long. Sorry, guys. But the cool thing about this is that now I don't need passwords. I don't need really almost anything. All I need to log into the Vinton server using the username, the user account Vinton, all I need to SSH to that thing are two pieces of property. One is my YubiKey configured with this secret, and the other is the key pair that I possess, that I've called Vinton.pub and Vinton. And to show you how this works, in terms of just going, to another account, let me go ahead and log in as root. Whoops, I don't want to do this here. Sorry, I want to get back to the client. So this is Cardiff again. And I'm going to turn myself into root. Actually, no, forget that. Let's go to a totally different, we've got SSH here, right? Okay, so this is Windows. And it has, we have an SSH directory here because SSH is portable, right? It works on all operating systems. And so what I'm going to do is just copy those certificate files. And this is because I have permissions, right? In the real world, you'd have to have some way to get at those files. And I do, just because of the way my computer's set up. At least I hope I do. And I'm going to say copy, and the syntax here is a little weird. I just know it, so bear with me. WSL.localhost, and then I think it's, which one is it on? Is it this guy? I just forgot. My bad. It is. Okay, so and this one is called what? Ubuntu 22.04.3. Let me back up and just get that list. Windows subs. Whoops. Okay, so it's the second one. So I have to reference this like it's a different server to get them. So yeah, CP is fine. WSL.localhost. And then I have to say Ubuntu -22.04. And then I can say home Chris.ssh. This is where we'll see if it works or not. If it doesn't, I know what I'm going to do. So did I get them? There they are. That's an ugly, ugly way to look at that directory. Sorry. So here are these files, right? I'm going to move them into my SSH folder. And since this is Windows, who knows if I'd have to do some other work to see if these files are adequately locked down. I'm just going to, I know you're going to say this is foolhardy of me, but I'm going to trust the Windows directory structure. And now that I'm saying that, actually, I know in Windows, if I want to trust the directory structure, it's better to copy these guys, because then they will take on the default permissions of the folder that I'm copying them into. So I'll do that. And now I'm gonna, well, I'll leave these files here just for a second. So now that I have those private and public keys, I'm going to say that I want to SSH from this. This is like a totally different computer, right? So now I'm going to SSH to Vinton at Vinton. And it says, never seen this one before. Ooh, you know what I forgot, right? That's not a default, key name. So I have to tell it, just like I did in Linux, that the file I want to use is .ssh Vinton. Is it above, I think? This one, autocomplete's not helping me as much. So we'll do that. Ooh, sure, make me a liar. There we go. It has to be the private one, but the one with the password. That makes sense. So the passphrase, which is password, in case you forgot. And now it asks me for the Google Authenticator key. So might as well pull this back on screen. And we'll go ahead and double click on that. Touch my YubiKey. It's copied this over here. I'm going to right click, which will do a paste, and do that. And now I'm logged on to Vinton. And so the point is that I don't have to do any setup on any other clients in order to use SSH to connect to that other server now. I just take the keys with me, and I use my same YubiKey, and I can connect from anywhere. Now, this is a good thing and it's a bad thing. The good thing is the portability, and you can do the same thing just with key pairs, right? You take the key with you, and you can connect from other systems. But there's kind of there's sort of a pecking order here. I'm going to pop this up in VS Code in just a second, especially because VS Code just launched way outside my other monitor. It's way off screen. Okay, here we go. Okay, so there's this pecking order of SSH. I'll call it login security goodness, okay? So you get a new SSH server and you can log in with passwords, right? Log in with the username and password. That's not bad. It's still encrypted, right? And everything. And then kind of the next step up after that is that you can log in. Well, you still log in. Lavani, that's my son's handle on his, he's been on TikTok and that gaming. I can never remember the name of the gaming channel that he used to be on. Sorry about that. Distracted. Rabbit. Squirrel. Okay, you can log in with passwords. You can use key pairs, right? Instead, you can and then I can say like RSA public private keys generated with SSH keygen, just as, that's how we're doing it. You can use two-factor authentication, but in general, you can use multi-factor authentication, like Google Authenticator. We'll say with additional factors, like Google Authenticator. And at that point, you're better off than most people, okay? But there's some problems. And the one that jumps to my mind is that you still have this problem. And we've seen it over and over. And I kind of told you, yeah, don't worry about it. Just go ahead. It's not a big deal. And what that problem is, it's got to be right here someplace. Hang on. Is right there. Okay. You connect to something and it says the authenticity of this SSH server can't be established. Don't know what it is, never seen it before. It's not known by any other names. Are you sure you want to keep connecting to this? Because it's all on you. We can't tell you anything. It's just some host on a wire showing me a fingerprint that I don't know anything about. That's a problem the first time you connect, right? So I'm going to go ahead and put this here. Well, this doesn't know what kind of file. Anyway, eventually that'll be kind of like code. And the other problem, so I'll say like this is problem one. You have no way to really validate that the server is the one you expect. That's the first problem. The second problem is the server really has no way to validate that you are who it expects. Or how about saying this? About that your computer is what it expects. So security these days is not just about securing the client, making the client prove who it is. You want the server to also prove who it is, right? You go to a website and Google Chrome or Edge or Firefox or whoever doesn't, the first time you go to Google, it doesn't tell you, oh my gosh, I don't know who this is. It's showing me the certificate. Do you want to trust this certificate? Because I don't know anything about it, but that's effectively what SSH does, right? Seems like a problem. And then even with web browsers, there's no sense of them knowing what the client is because they're just serving up connections to anybody because they don't care. They're just giving content back to you. But in the case of SSH or RDP for that matter, it's a little more intimate, if you will. They're actually letting you onto the server to do things at the OS level. The stakes are a little bit higher here, right? I'm not just saying, hey, tell me where all the cute kitten videos are on other sites. We're saying, hey, I'm going to connect to you. I'm going to edit documents. I'm going to change your configuration. It would be a good idea. It would be nice if the server could actually know, yes, you're in the same Kerberos realm or Active Directory domain as the rest of the computers in this building or something like that. And Kerberos and Active Domain can do that. Active Directory can do that. SSH cannot, not on its own. So the article that I have been typing to you, let me see, I've got it up here someplace. I think I do. Oh, here, I'm gonna pull this over and we will find it. I think it's at the top of my cert. Yeah, how to do SSH properly. If you look at this, they don't talk about key pairs. They talk about certificates. And what the certificates are for is so that both the server and the client automatically know that the other one's legit. If you read through this, and this could be kind of this week's Leroy Jenkins level, I might put it in the notes, but if you look at this, the certificates that get issued allow the server to know that the client's legit and that there's been a certificate issued by a certificate issuer that it trusts, that basically says it's okay for this client to use your SSH service, okay? And similarly, the client can know that this SSH server has been approved to be an SSH server in your organization. So there's no more of this thing with, oh, gee, here's a server you're connecting to. I don't know anything about it. You're going to have to tell me it's okay, which if you think about it is really a terrible way to set up the most secure connection you're going to use at your workplace, right? So yeah, I'll put a note out. I'll put a note out in Zulip or probably in our class meeting notes about this, because this article does a really good job of breaking down how you can set up a CA for your organization. And a CA is nothing more than a special kind of certificate. And if you tell your servers to trust that CA, then other certificates can be granted using that certificate as their authority. And then you can basically say to each other, yeah, that one's okay, that one's okay, that one's okay. And then if you see somebody show up, like if I show up and I've got my public and private key and I've got the right Google Authenticator secret, but I try to log on, it'll say, where's your cert? You're not one of us, go away. So it's another way that you can lock things down. And this really is a fantastic configuration. Is it overkill for the competition? Well, not if we get good at setting it. It is, it's definitely overkill. But if we get to where we've got a setup script that could do it automatically, yeah, it'd be really cool. The problem, of course, is the green team. How do we configure the user's boxes, in a timely manner to be able to interact with us this way? Probably not worth it given the other things that we have to set up. But if you're curious, I know, Henry, you said you love living in rabbit holes. This is a great one. This is really, really cool. So yeah, that's all for this video. And hope some of you find this interesting. It's good stuff. Talk to you later. Bye.